it's Mr. Searle. Thank you so much for joining me for the first edition of the Teacher Talk podcast presented by SEARLE Learning. This is something that I've wanted to do for such a long time, and I'm really excited that I'm getting to do it. The Teacher Talk podcast is essentially an avenue for teachers to talk about what they're really good at. And that can be really useful for early career teachers, really useful for other teachers who, if you're a good one, never stop learning and never stop adjusting, never stop being flexible, never stop learning new ways of being able to teach, to connect, to create learning pathways for our little people. There will be a huge range of teachers interviewed on this podcast. I'm a primary school teacher, particularly early learning, so we're going to start there, and you'll be hearing a lot about that from me and from my early learning colleagues. But there is also people from secondary schools, special education, and specialist teachers that will be really shedding a light on the breadth of things that we do as teachers. Essentially, we're going to be talking a lot about pedagogy and about what has worked for us. So yes, that's going to be fantastic for early career teachers, but really it's going to be great for everyone. And it's also going to be great for parents to hear from teachers and get a better insight as to what we actually do and perhaps how much we care as well. So without further ado, we're gonna get going now. Normally there will be someone with me on the couch and I'll be asking the questions. But as it's only me on the couch, well, except for my little dog Hugo, who might make an appearance at some point. As it's just me on the couch, I'm going to get my really good friend Vert to ask me the questions today. Are you ready to do that, Vert?
Oh, hello, Mr. Searle. Yes, I'm super ready. You're going to get the big, hard questions from me.
Well, I can't wait for that. Hopefully that worked. I'm really excited to get started. Let's go.
Let's go. Bonjour, Mr. Searle. The first question is, why did you decide to become a teacher?
All right, so I decided to be a teacher after already having quite a lengthy career in the performing arts. So I am quite old and have been around for quite some time and have lived a few lives. And the first big career I had, was acting and singing. So I graduated from school in 1996 from Newtown Performing Arts here in Sydney on Gadigal land. And then I started auditioning for drama schools because I wanted to become an actor. I got into the Victorian College of the Arts, Company 2002. So I was there for 3 years. Deep study of acting and theatre making. So that took me up until 2022. I graduated, I got an agent here in Sydney and started my career. As probably a lot of you know, a career in the performing arts is not the easiest thing in the world, but I love it. I loved it. It's at the core what I know I'm really good at, and so yeah, I was in a lot of plays, musicals, cabarets, all sorts of stuff, lots of touring, and then at some point I also started heading a band. So I was in a band as well as the lead singer and lyric writer, and that was a huge amount of fun. Again, lots of touring, doing festivals, all sorts of stuff, lots of dressing up, and being pretty glamorous, and that was crazy but amazing. And then at some point I started to feel like I needed to do something that was a little less selfish and a little more selfless. And not that being an artist or having a career in the performing arts is at all selfish. But of course, I was finding myself a lot of the time not actually on stage, but behind a coffee machine or managing a restaurant or a bar. And I didn't want to do that. And I felt like I was wasting my talents for the 5% of the time that I was actually doing what I loved and really using all of myself. So I guess I was starting to feel like I really needed to do something that was making more of a difference and contributing more. I was married to a wonderful teacher at the time, a high school teacher who unfortunately and sadly has passed away since then. But they really gave me a lot of inspiration as to how important education is and how much of a difference you can make through being a teacher. So I decided to go and do my master's, go back to uni. I did my master's in education, and I also did a whole lot of side courses, did extra stuff around Aboriginal education, around filmmaking with students, all sorts of stuff. I did a whole nother thing on quality children's literature, and yeah, then graduated, did well, got targeted straight away, and so before my course had finished, I had my first full-time placement with the Department of Education in a Sydney school, and yeah, so I had been doing my pracs in the Western suburbs of Sydney, and I had discovered through doing my pracs, so I'm sure you know what that means. That's when you're going out to schools and you're practicing before you graduate. I was working in schools out west, and I was working in low socioeconomic areas with high refugee and/or immigrant population and Aboriginal population. So I really found that incredibly rewarding, and I could literally see how my approach to teaching, which has always been about creative pathways, using my drama background and my music background and general performing background, to inform the way that I teach and the way that I get kids to connect with learning. Found that so rewarding and so amazing. And so when you like nominate the area that you'd like to go to before you graduate, I think that's the way it worked. I nominated Western Sydney because I was working at a school out there, and I thought, well, if not this school, then a school near here where I can keep making a difference in this particular demographic. So got my full-time placement at a school out there called Guildford Public School, and had an amazing 5 years before moving on. And that's how I started teaching. How and why?
How was your early career?
Yes, so my early career was, it's hard work. It's really challenging. I was really lucky. I was married at the time to a teacher who knew exactly what I was going through, and I was really lucky. I had a support network at home. But when you start off, it's a huge amount of work because you're not only honing your craft in terms of being in front of a class and teaching, but you're also getting your head around the curriculum. You're getting your head around programming, which is a massive thing, which takes years to master. And really, you've never mastered it because it's always changing. It's hard. And I got really tired it's the first 2 years. I got so tired and quite stressed. But I have to say, I felt quite lucky in a way that I was coming to it as a mature age person in my 30s, because I think although I was working really hard and it was stressful and I was getting tired, I wasn't taking things as personally as I could see some of my younger colleagues were doing. I'll talk a little bit about that as we move on in this episode, but there's a lot of stuff around guilt as a teacher because the job is much bigger than any one person is able to achieve. And you don't really know that at the beginning. You just constantly feel like you're treading water and that you're behind and that you're not good enough. So I was up until midnight every night at least, and then getting up at 5 or 6 o'clock the following morning to do a full day of teaching, and then go home and continue on all of my hours and hours and hours and hours of prep and really over preparing in those first couple of years. The flip side is that I totally fell in love with teaching. It wasn't long into it that I could see results, even in just the little things. And as you know, and it's drummed into you as an early career teacher, teaching is all about relationships. It's all about building trust with your students and really finding out about them, knowing them and how they learn. It's in the standards of teaching. And when you achieve that, it's incredibly fulfilling. And you go home and you think about that particular student and how much you feel you really know them, that you've started to work out what their interests are and how to perhaps get a bit of an into getting them to understand content that you're teaching. And yeah, that's incredibly fulfilling. So my early career, I was exhausted, but also loving it. So a few notes there for the newbie. Really important to be surrounded by people who understand. Sometimes you need to explain to them what it is that you're doing and what it is that you're going through. There's a question coming up about work-life balance, and I'll address that then. But yeah, also important to just not to flog yourself to death. Because as we know, too many teachers burn out too quickly into their career, and we end up losing them. And sometimes we lose really talented, wonderful, caring people who maybe have cared so much that they've burnt themselves out. And that's always really sad when that happens. So yeah, it's all about looking after yourself as well in it all.
Mr. Searle, how do you know that you are a good teacher?
How do I know I'm a good teacher? Well, that took a little while to work out. I think I always was quite confident, and I was really excited about bringing. I knew that I had a unique skill set to bring to teaching. So I knew that there was the potential for me to be a good teacher. It wasn't until, well into my career that I was recognizing my ability to find ways of making kids understand something. I'm thinking, so I'm trying to give you a tangible example of that. I taught a little boy who in year 2 was my second year of teaching, and he hated school, had a really poor relationship with the institution of school, had really poor attendance. I became his year 2 teacher. He was incredibly combative, incredibly resistant, could be quite not violent, but physical. He'd throw the odd chair and scream at me and want to leave the classroom, that kind of thing. In that second year, it didn't take me long to get him. And sometimes all it takes is for a kid to understand that you care and that you see them. You see them specifically. Now, that's really hard to do when you have a big class of kids, or with their own needs and different personalities, different ways of learning, etc. but sometimes it's really important to make that contact. Once I'd done that and I had told him that I'd seen how good he is, really picking up on his strengths. So he loved to dance. And so I introduced lots of dancing into the classroom and into lessons and into brain breaks, which is your little gap between lessons. And I let him show leadership in that space. And he just came alive. Instantly respected me for seeing him. And also he wanted to impress. He wanted to show his worth more and more. His approach to learning completely changed. His approach to school completely changed. I remember his mum being quite teary with me and telling me how much he loved school and loved his teacher. And, he just, wants to come to school on the weekends, that kind of thing. When that stuff happens, you know you've done something good. Yeah. And I think I know what the next question is.
What makes you feel like you're a bad teacher?
Oh, goodness. Well, of course, there is always going to be the bad with the good, right? There's been plenty of times where I've felt like a bad teacher. And I think probably early on, that was very much around not getting things done. Or not getting things done to the standard that I would ordinarily like to do things. Because the truth is that it is impossible. It is impossible. It's a very complicated, complex task being a teacher, with lots of elements that need to be cared for all the time. Obviously, first and foremost is the happiness and well-being of your students, because no learning takes place if students don't have that in place. But then, of course, outside of that, there's just so much, and a lot of it's admin. Initially, when you start programming and like lesson planning, we'll talk about all of this in future episodes. And we'll talk about, ways of prioritizing things and not trying to do everything. And sometimes you have to be really strong to do that. Sometimes you have to say, no, I'm not going to be able to do that, but I'll do this because I think that's the most important thing. Anyway, we'll talk about all of that at another time. What I wanted to answer that with is, what must be? So look, you learn things as you go. I'm a big presence and I have a big voice, and I mainly work with K-2. So if I'm teaching kindergarten, I've got to understand that my presence and my voice can work for me and can work against me. Lots of little kids might find me a little bit overbearing at first or a little bit too loud. So I've really changed, because I was sort of like performing, I guess, when I first started. I was putting on a show with a great big voice. Oh my gosh, kiddies. Not in American accent, but you know what I mean. And because I really wanted that engagement, and that's definitely, a strength. But I quickly learned that doesn't work for everybody. And you will see some kids with their hair blowing back and their eyes wide open and, scared of this huge thing in front of them, or this booming voice. And of course, I'm male, so lots of kids, especially, just in general. I mean, and we can talk about this again. So many things to talk about. We could talk about gender representation within teaching, specifically within primary schools. There's very few male teachers, and there's reasons for that. But for me, I had to understand that for some kids, I'll be the first man that they've known. For most kids, I'll be the first male educator that they will have known, because I work with the Lilies. So, I've got to take that into consideration. And, I've had little kids tell me that they don't like me on the first day of the school year and that they don't want me as their teacher, that kind of stuff, which can break your heart, but you can't show them that. So it's trial and error. So I became a much more calm, much more patient, much more observant teacher over time. That was really important because, yes, the engagement, the entertainment, whatever, yeah, that's great. But actually, it's really seeing the kids and really listening to the kids and letting them feel seen and heard. That's you're in. And yes, you can make them giggle, all of that stuff. I very quickly realized that yelling doesn't work. That kids will just shut down if you raise your voice, and it totally is detrimental to your relationship with them. And sometimes that's hard, especially when, say, for instance, something potentially dangerous has happened. A kid has jumped off a chair, whatever, and you feel you need to shock them into submission, by raising your voice and say, "How dare you do that?" Or whatever. Doesn't work. These days, if a kid jumps off their chair, I will get very quiet and very serious and walk up to them and tell them that was so dangerous and I was so worried about you. And please never, ever do that again. And they will usually get a bit weepy and go, "Oh, I didn't mean it." But they've heard me. If I go, "Row, row, row, row," they won't hear the message. They'll shut down. They'll usually get cranky. They won't learn anything for ages until they self-regulate or come out of that state. I'm babbling. So yeah. I've felt like a bad teacher at those times when I've felt like I'm not staying on top of things, workload-wise, or I haven't been patient enough, or, I've raised my voice, which fortunately doesn't happen anymore, but certainly did in my early years.
What was most challenging as a new teacher?
Goodness. So what is most challenging? So the question is about being a new teacher, but what I would like to talk about applies to all teachers. It is definitely, to me, and a lot of people that I know, singularly the most challenging part of teaching at the moment. And that is the increasing complexity and diversity of our cohort. So specifically in the public school education, so if you are listening in another country other than Australia, what I'm referring to is publicly funded, government-funded free education. It's getting really challenging because now there's several factors at play here, especially in these couple of years post-COVID. We've seen a huge increase in students with diagnosed or undiagnosed conditions, especially around ADHD, ASD, which is autism spectrum, and anxiety. And it is the public schools who take the great majority of these students. There are several reasons for that. Sometimes it's about demographic. Obviously we are the free option. In Australia, outside of us, we've got the Catholic sector and the private sector or independent sector. They are extremely expensive schools, and if a family doesn't have the money to send you to one of those schools, you have to come to a public school. Nothing wrong with that. Public system is extraordinary, and highly audited, highly structured. So it's quality. However, that quality can get diluted by the challenges that that we face. And this is the big one, I feel, at the moment, is that teacher burnout's another really big one. But really, underneath that, it's the increasing complexity of our cohort.
Mr. Searle, we know that SEARLE Learning is all about creative pedagogy. What does it mean to you?
Yeah, so creative pedagogy. So this is my baby, basically. It's what I really focused in on when I did my master's. And actually, while I was doing my master's, I started an online, what would you have called that? A blog, I guess. Yeah, a blog. A blog? Yes. And that was called Creative Pedagogies. And I had a website, creativepedagogies.com, and it was basically a discussion page, or really it was my diary entries about finding creative ways to teach literacy, specifically literacy and numeracy. We have wonderful curriculum here in Australia, wonderful syllabuses, or syllabi. However, you don't ever really get taught the how. Now, there are suggestions made by departments of education across the country, etc., but they're generally pretty dry, and they're not necessarily creative, or they don't have they're not looking at teaching through the lens of art, or the skills of drama and music, and dance, and visual art. Actually, yeah, especially visual art. So important and necessary and often disregarded. So that was really my baby when I was doing my master's, and I put a lot of thought into it, and I got really excited. And then you get into the classroom, and really I was trying everywhere I could to implement sort of more creative pedagogies. That was a bit hard to start with, and I did get a little bit downhearted at times because I was the new kid on the block, and you work collaboratively, and I'd come up with these wild ideas about ways we could teach addition and subtraction or whatever it was, and it'd be like, oh no, I think we'll just stick with the PowerPoint that we used last year. And so I had some resistance. Anyway, it didn't take me long to be able to really run with it. And really I started seeing amazing results in terms of participation, in terms of kids understanding, picking up things more quickly. And what I'm going to talk a lot about throughout the SEARLE Learning platform is finding pathways. So finding multiple pathways to the same learning, to the same information. And that's something I feel really passionate about, that as teachers we have to be flexible. We should be flexible in terms of our teaching styles, because if you stick to one style, that might work for 50% of your cohort, but it probably doesn't work for 50% of your cohort. You need to find other ways of teaching the same thing. It's why content repetition is really important. It's why we shouldn't have an overly crammed curriculum. We should be able to go over things and do things in different ways. Let kids experiment and find out things on their own, problem solve, and do that creatively. Because, it's one of my mottos. Sometimes it's the fourth go that a child will get it. When the penny will drop, when the light bulb will go off, or go on. I've lost track again. What was the question? Oh, yes. So that's what creative pedagogy means to me. That's really obvious, but I'll also be asking teachers what it means to them and getting them to reflect on what creative pedagogies they use and have used and what works. Because I think that's really important for everybody to know, right? Free professional development here at SEARLE Learning. Next question. Thank you, Vert.
As a teacher, how do you self-regulate? Or how do you wind down or be a little bit more happy?
Oh, good question. How do we self-regulate? How do we find a work-life balance? Gosh, it's not easy. It is incredibly so, as I touched on at the beginning of this episode, really important that you have a support network. Now, they don't have to be teachers, but if they are teachers, great, because they tend to understand what you're going through. Chances are there might be teachers in your family. That tends to be the way teaching works. Or, colleagues or people you went to uni with, and stay in contact with those people. Stay in your WhatsApp groups with the kids you went to uni with, because you're all gonna go through the fire of a couple of years, and if you're there to support each other, ask questions from one another, that's really helpful. What do I do specifically? So I didn't do this very well in the first couple of years. I don't think there's any new teacher that does. But it's really important not to lose yourself. I actually think it's really sad when I have young colleagues. I'm talking about people in their, usually young women who've just graduated from university and they've entered teaching, and they are in over their heads and they're treading water and they're panicky. They're finishing the day and shutting themselves in the storeroom to weep. And then they have left teaching after 2 years. I've seen it so many times, believe it or not. So that makes me sad. How do we avoid that? Well, there's big problems there that can't be solved easily. But definitely support network. It's important that you know at the beginning that it's going to be hard, that you're not alone, and that it's okay to fail. And it's really important that is okay, because we have such a high level of responsibility and care for our darling students. It's a lot. And if you feel like you're failing them, that can hit you really hard. So it's really important that right from the beginning, you do have some sort of separation between school and home life, between you and your job. That's going to make things a little bit easier. It's easier said than done. And as I said, I wasn't particularly good at this at the beginning, but it probably was a bit easier for me because I was a little bit older. I think it is harder if you're young and you don't know anything else. I also think if you are in your 20s, you should be having a social life. It's the funnest, best decade of your life usually. So for goodness sake, don't lose yourself to the job. Make sure that you are going, if you've got a partner, make sure you've got a weekly date night. If you don't have a partner and you're single, make sure you're going out with friends, that you're going to the movies, that you're whatever else is your. Well, one thing that I do is I'm in a book club, and that brings me huge amounts of joy, and it means that I'm catching up with a group of friends once a month who I adore, to talk literature with, and it means that I'm reading all the time, something that has nothing to do with 5-year-olds and teaching. So I read a novel, at least one novel every month, and I have to read that novel. So I have to build in time for me to sit down and do something that is completely unrelated to my job. Love that. Such a good idea. And it doesn't have to be books if you're not a reader, although, I hope you're a reader if you're a teacher. And what else do I do, and what do I love? Obviously I have a dog, and the great thing about having a pet is that they force you to go for walks and to think about them instead of whatever it is that you are. When you're report writing and you've got this little thing scratching at your knee, going, "Oh, for gosh sake, I need a ball throw." But now, very important to have those little things. Very important to have a social life. So make sure once a week, at least once a week, you are catching up with friends or going out for a dinner or whatever it is. And getting sleep. Make sure you get sleep. I wasn't doing this in the first couple of years. And I got really tired. And that whole thing about, you have to be so patient as a primary school teacher, especially with the younger years. You have to be so patient. If you're surviving on 4 or 5 hours sleep a night, you're not going to be patient. You're going to be grumpy. And I had some grumpy days in my first couple of years. And really, that's not fair on the kids. It's not fair on you either. Get 8 hours of sleep a night, even if it means that all of the prep doesn't get done.
Why are the early years of school so important?
Oh my gosh. So I feel like I've been talking for too long, so I'm going to stop now. But I really just wanted to say that, the early years are so important. The early years build a relationship and a trust between students and their learning careers. I think that idea of being a lifelong learner, I think it starts in kindergarten. Sometimes it starts before kindergarten, but and they come to us and they're already a lifelong learner, which is like, but often it starts in kindergarten, starts with us, and obviously continues into stage 1 or year 1 and year 2. It's where all of that stuff gets established. I can talk about my experience more later because I think I'm starting to lose my voice. I was really badly bullied when I was at primary school, and things like that can really colour your experience, and certainly can colour your learning in your school career. I would say that I lost several years of schooling to bullying because I just wasn't safe and I just wasn't present. So I'm really passionate about making sure that those first years are incredibly positive, really rewarding, and that my students come to school singing. That's what I really want. And that's about it. Next week we will have a wonderful, just worked out who it is, a wonderful guest who will have so much knowledge to impart. So I'm really looking forward to that. Sorry if I've rambled too much and you've heard so much of my voice. I promise next week it won't just be my voice. And thank you so much for joining, whether you're a teacher or a parent. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. This is at the beginning of all of this, and I'm so thrilled if you have decided to join. Please make sure you subscribe. That helps me hugely, and do the liking and all that stuffy wuffy. All right. Thanks again, and I will see you next time on Teacher Talk. Bye.